A dedicated gamer and antisocial shut-in downloads the latest update to their favourite virtual reality game. But instead of going to their favourite game, they find themselves transported to a brand new world. Reset to level 1, they have nothing but a bear onesie that grants them extraordinary power to their name. Unfortunately, when they take it off, they're nothing but the average human. With pause for concern, they must go out and explore this new world in Kuma 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 Bear. Hey everybody, it's Stephen here and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be looking at reviewing the first 3 light novels in the Kuma 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 Bear series. So what does Kuma stand for, you might ask? Well, it stands for bear. Yes, the title of this book is Bear, Bear, Bear and Bear. And does it live up to its name? Yes, it does. So what is this book about, you might ask? Well, it's about a 15-year-old girl called Yuna, who is actually a very antisocial kind of shut-in and loves nothing more than to actually game. That is her preferred lifestyle. Now, to fund her lifestyle, because she doesn't actually see the point in school and she's actually rarely intelligent, she actually dabbles in the stock market and is rarely successful. It doesn't really go into too much detail about that one, just that she is, and she's made a lot of money. Now, when we first start off, we find out her parents are a little bit worried about her antisocial life and they do try to get her to go back to school. But when Yuna drops a cool 100 million yen, which is the equivalent of about £1 million or $1 million into their lap, they soon forget about their daughter and go on an around the world travel expense paid on her dime. Now, Yuna, being who she is, doesn't actually mind. It means she gets to live the lifestyle of her dreams. She stays at home as a shut-in, playing her favourite VR MMO or virtual reality massive multiplayer online game. But when a new patch comes out for this game, she soon finds herself transported to another world instead, with the only thing to her name being a bear onesie. Now, the bear onesie is actually extremely overpowered, and if she was to ever take it off, she would just be the average 15-year-old girl. So while she finds the bear costume being extremely ridiculous to actually look at, and she feels embarrassed for wearing it, she can't really take it off because she's actually in a fantasy world. Now, how does this story progress? Well, you're going to have to really read the books to find out too much details because I don't want to spoil it. In book 1, however, we do find her joining up with the Adventurers Guild, going on a number of adventures to earn herself the title The Bloody Bear at the age of 15, and making friends around the village, even though she is seen as an anomaly and a bit strange because of the bear onesie. In fact, she runs into trouble with fellow adventurers because they think of her as being ridiculous and actually don't take her serious. And this does lead to some complications, which she has to try and figure a way out of. And surprise, surprise, she does get herself out of this one because it wouldn't be much of a story if she didn't. Now, I won't go into details about how she does that, but suffice to say, it is entertaining and it is a fantastic read. Book 1 follows her on this journey, getting herself settled down into this town where the story mainly takes place, and we find her, as I said, making friends and settling roots, as well as going on some mini adventures. The book itself is actually more a slice of life than a sword and sorcery kind of fighting slugfest. It does have the odd kind of fight scenes in it, which are rarely enjoyable, but it does also have that slice of life element where she's trying to settle down and still wants to live in that kind of relaxed life that she's always done in her past. So she's got these sort of conflicting emotions in her. 1, her antisocial shut-in behaviour, and 2, her gamer personality where she comes out of herself and actually wants to go on adventures. She has to sort of find a balance between those two and actually become a brand new person in this new world. Now, what do I think of book 1? Book 1 was a really enjoyable read and I stormed through the book. It had a lot of good points in it, it felt nicely paced, There wasn't any really bad writing in it, and the artwork in the book is rarely good. It follows the kind of design that is nice and simple on the eyes, yet has enough detail to not make it look too simplistic. So examples of this are, here's the picture just inside the front cover. Normally you'll get coloured pictures in the very front cover of most books, and then later in the book you tend to get black and white ones, so here we go again. As I said, it has a kind of cutesy kind of art style to it, which actually is a bit interesting because the book itself is actually a bit cutesy in some ways in its writing, but it's also got a bit of more a gruesome, I don't know if you could call it gruesome kind of aspect, but a more gritty kind of aspect to it sometimes when you're talking about skinning monsters and stuff like that, as you can tell by the nickname of the bloody bear, which I mentioned earlier. So the book has an overall good pace, good artwork and good feel to it. Now, are there any cons, you might ask? Yes. Now, book one follows a kind of style which I've come across in other books before and I don't like. If you've watched my previous reviews, a good example of this is the Bofori series. It actually has what I call stat boxes. Now, what are stat boxes, you might ask? They're actually sections of the book where you see the character's actual stats. It shows you all of her equipment, it shows you all of her skills, it shows you a level. So what's wrong with that, you might ask? Well, every time she gets a new skill or every time she goes up a level, we get a stat box. And it rehashes the same thing over and over again with just the new added information on it. Now that wouldn't be so bad if they wasn't so big and took up so much room. So for an example of that one, and this is a bit later in the book, about halfway through, we can see here the stat box starts off here, goes down all the next page, and then, if I can actually turn the page correctly, apologies everybody. It goes down the next page and then down again. And this is recurring all the way through the book. So the book, while it's a decent sized, when you look at how much information is actually in a stat box, so we'll find another one, the writing isn't as much. And because it's always the same information rehashed over and over, you skip by it. This would actually reduce the amount of information in the book a considerable amount and make it a lot smaller. I don't like these when they're done incorrectly, and I think this book actually does it in a bad way. Now don't get me wrong, it's only a minor inconvenience, but it's something I think they could have left out of this book, and they wouldn't have had any issues with it. If they'd have just kept with a small stat box with the new skill in it, rather than rehashing all the old skills and her stats, which are exactly the same each and every single time, apart from her level going up, we wouldn't have this kind of issue. Otherwise, we're just going over the same information over and over and over again, and it's not something that happens just once or twice in the book, it happens over and over and over again to the point where it's actually saturated in it. So that is a big con for me. Due to that, it's actually sort of lowered my overall kind of rating of the book, but not too much. So for book one, I'd probably give it a rating of 4.3 out of 5 because of that one bit. And as I said, it's not something that takes away from the story itself. It's not something that takes away from the flow, but it's something that is so repetitive, it can drive you a bit crazy after a while. Now, on to book two. So book two follows the same kind of cutesy kind of artwork. And again, on the side, it keeps the same one. And on the back, we go to like a more chibi kind of style. Chibi is actually a smaller version, kind of cutie kind of version of what you'd get for a normal one. So rather than the character looking a bit more realistic, like on the front, okay, they're not like realistic like you and me, but they're realistic in kind of like a cartoon kind of aspect. A chibi is sort of like a cartoon of a cartoon. It makes it look really cute and small. A good example of this one is my chibi plushie over here. It's kind of like a more cutesy version of a cutesy kind of cartoon. And it brings some more endearing kind of behaviour to the book. Now, book 2, what is that about? I said in book 1, she actually settled down in the village. Book 2, we find her still settled down in the village, but we see her expanding her circle within it. So book 2 centres around her actually visiting the nobility and actually making more connections. She has to actually come across various issues and political intrigue within the actual book, not too saturated kind of like that, but she has to deal with like nobles, consequence of nobles, and how to actually navigate that kind of thing herself, being just a normal person never coming across it. On top of that, she also has to deal with the adventures that she goes on and problems within her social circle. Now, I'm not going to go into that into detail. As I said, it's spoiler kind of behaviour. Suffice to say, it's a really good book again. The pacing of it is another one that I just read through. Now, book 1 took me probably a day and a half to read. Book 2 I read in one day. I actually sat down and read nothing but this book, and I managed to finish it in just one day, and I loved it. So that is how much I enjoyed this book. It was sort of a weekend where I was just relaxing and I just stormed through it. So that gives you the kind of idea about how much I enjoyed this one. Now, what's the artwork like in this one? Like the first one, it's actually really good. So inside the front cover, we can see it's got some nice artwork. And then later in it, we've also got the same kind of art style again. It's a really good read. And now the cons, does it fall into the same kind of con as the first book where we had those stat boxes? I'm actually happy to say it doesn't. Book 2 actually puts the stat boxes at the front of the book. We actually see them as a one-off, and then we get just a brief overview actually in the writing itself. So the book itself is actually just as thick as the first book, yet it doesn't fall into the trap of actually having stat boxes throughout it. In fact, we don't see them. The stat boxes are put at the start of the book, so the one overriding problem that I had with the first book has actually been resolved by book 2. Now, I don't know what made them go down this route. It's hopefully feedback from fellow readers like myself and reviewers who actually fed back that it was a problem, but I'm happy to inform you that it was resolved by book 2. So if you do read book 1 and the stat boxes put you off, rest assured that it's actually resolved by book 2, so you won't have to actually deal with that one. You just get a smooth story that goes all the way through. Again, this is based on a slice of life with some fantasy action elements in it, and it's written in a way that I really enjoyed. Now, what would I review this book overall? Now, for this one, I'd probably give it 4.5 to 4.7. It was a good read. So you can see the actual stat boxes, while they weren't an overriding factor for the actual downgrading points, they was significant enough to actually put it between 0.5 and 0.7 kind of thing without them. Now, on to book 3. Book 3, again, has the same kind of cute kind of style on the front, has the same kind of art on the side, and this is a better example of what chibi is. So as you can see, it's sort of like a smaller, cuter version of the actual main character. Now, what's the art like in this one? Now, again, in the front, you've got a nice coloured art, although it's a bit brighter than usual. And in the main book, we carry on with the same kind of style. Now, book 3 follows our character Yuna as she actually travels outside of the village where she's actually been making her home, to the royal capital. This one, while it still has a slice of life element to it, where she actually goes out and rather than just being an adventurer all the time, actually looks at building a side business to help support her and her comrades around her, actually has a more of a adventure kind of feel to it rather than the previous two books. Now, it's actually written in a way that is really good, or I do believe it is myself. Now, this series also has an anime adaptation, and these first three books make up probably the first 2/3 of the actual anime. And the anime itself skips out a lot of the details that are actually within this book and actually rewrites it completely in some aspects. Now, that means when I read these books, I was happy to see all the additional content, as well as actually seeing what the author intended in the book to what was changed in the anime. Now, the third book itself, as I said, is a very smooth read as well, and this one probably took me a day and a half to read. As I said, I stormed through this entire series. I'd probably rate book 3 again about 4.5 to 4.7. Overall, I'd put all three books at 4.5, and that's only because of book 1's stat boxes at the start, which was then rectified by book 2 and book 3, because book 3 also keeps the same stat boxes at the front like book 2 did. Overall, I think this is a book that you would enjoy if you're looking for a kind of slice of life kind of isekai with a bit of an adventure on the side. If you're looking for something that's actually an adventure all the way through with constant fighting and constant exploring, this isn't the book for you. This is more about someone finding their way in the new world and making their home there, making friendships, going on adventures, and actually coming out of their shell for who they was originally and redesigning themselves in this brand new world. Overall, I would highly recommend it, as I said. If you've read this book and you have a different opinion from me, please let me know in the comments below. If however you like this book like myself, please let me know as well, because I'd love to talk about this series with people. Anyway, thank you very much for watching my review of this series, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Take care for now, everybody. Bye.